All right, hey VC, I'm Jamie. Welcome back. We are back with another video, and back with some, well, fairly recent vinyl finds within the past several months or so. And I thought I'd try a different presentation on this one, just because we've got a fair chunk of albums to get through. And yeah, most of these were purchased through online sellers, and a few through some online vinyl auctions, as many of the record stores, well, all the record stores in Ontario pretty much have to remain closed with the current lockdown. And hopefully we'll be able to reopen on June 14th. And again, some of them are also doing curbside pickup, that sort of thing. Okay, let's get right to it. We've got some 3D funk right off the top, and I don't know if you can see that on the cover. This is, of course, a great funk classic, Parliament and Mothership Connection, and this is a reissue, as you can tell, with the 3D cover. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of Funkadelic. Not so much Parliament or Parliament Funkadelic, but it's a great one, absolutely great one. Couldn't say no to that. Emerson, Lake and Palmer finally picked up In Concert. This was later reissued as Works, as like a double album. The initial one was simply called In Concert. Now it's this way because the record actually comes out the top like this. And as you can see, this is the Montreal Forum. And I don't know if you can see the fleur-de-lis flags, the flag of Quebec there. This is when Emerson, Lake and Palmer actually toured with a complete orchestra. Unbelievable. Now, sadly, as far as I've read, that it's hard to say which tracks were or weren't recorded at the Montreal Forum. Many of the tracks apparently weren't, even though it's pictured here, the Montreal Forum. But it's still a really great listen to. And I guess this was initially supposed to be a double album, but they decided only on a single album. But later issued it as a double album, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, In Concert. Burton Cummings, formerly of the Guess Who, lots of solo work. This is Burton Cummings and Sweet Sweet from the early 80s, and this one had the big radio hit, You Saved My Soul. Smooth sounds of Burton Cummings. Here's just one of those records I think should be probably in everybody's collection, The Human League and Dare. Of course, this features the massive hit, Don't You Want Me Baby. Fascinating that for such a big hit, it is the last track on the album. Usually for big hits, they're usually like the first track or first couple of tracks, but last track on the album, Don't You Want Me. Okay, and some great 80s stuff here. This is Nina and 99 Luftballons. So this is the North American release, and this is also a promo copy. So half the sides in English, half the sides in German. Of course, featuring 99 Luftballons, both in German and in English. I actually prefer the German version. So there you go. Some Nina, happy to pick that up. Grace Jones. I do love Grace Jones as an artist. Not a particular fan of this album. This is called Fame. Now, this is really disco. I really like Grace Jones stuff from the 80s, but this is really full-on disco. Not necessarily my cup of tea. And this is one of her like second or third albums, and then she really changed direction in the 80s moving forward. But her early stuff is really disco. Okay, let's get back to some rock. How about Artful Dodger, a band I'm not totally familiar with, but did enjoy this album. And I've seen a few of their albums out in the wild, usually for pretty cheap. And this is the album Honor Among Thieves. American band, pretty straightforward rock, but very enjoyable. Artful Dodger. I'll have to seek out some more of their stuff. Thomas Dolby. This is an EP. I don't often pick up EPs, but this was Blinded by Science, which of course features the hit She Blinded Me with Science. Slightly longer on this version, but it's not too long that it becomes unlistenable. Like, some of those 12 inches or those extended plays, I find them a little tedious to listen to, but this one's not too bad. So this is just a 5-song EP featuring She Blinded Me with Science. I'm not going to be able to get that song out of my head for the rest of the day. Okay, Stan Rogers, a great Canadian folk singer, the best of Stan Rogers. I've had this previously on CD. They have put this out on vinyl, which was nice to see, with some extra tracks not available on the CD, which is usually tends to be the other way around. So this is a nice double album. Nice place to start with, if you're not familiar with this artist, Best of Stan Rogers. Okay, Tony Bennett. And was I reading? Tony Bennett will be 95 this year. This is Tony Bennett with Lady Gaga and Cheek to Cheek. Now, he's had a lot of duet albums, but I think Tony Bennett does, for the most part, pick good artists to work with, like Lady Gaga, Diana Krall, Katie Lang, that sort of thing. So couldn't say no to Tony Bennett and Lady Gaga. And it's nice because Lady Gaga really does have a lot of love and respect for Tony Bennett as well. And lots of love for Tommy Dolan. This is one of his solo albums. And yeah, he doesn't have didn't have too many solo albums. This is a reissue, as you can see, on Speaker's Corners Records. And this is Private Eyes. And really enjoyed this album. I do have this on CD as well. But yeah, Tommy Dolan, formerly of Deep Purple, and Private Eyes. All right, let's turn it up with George Thorogood and the Destroyers' Maverick. And it's interesting, the title track, which is also the last song on here, is really sort of very, very country. And it's so different when you're listening to this whole album. Of course, this features I Drink Alone. I love George Thorogood. Just straight on blues, turn it up, rock and blues, no nonsense. Okay, here's an artist I've talked a lot about, Jesse Winchester, and this is the album that is called Third Down and 110 to Go. This features the song Isn't That So, which is just a nice kind of country rock kind of sounding, kind of very acoustic, but Jesse Winchester's just got a really laid back, relaxing sound, nice vocalist on the Bearsville label. So there's that one. And Jesse Winchester, this is A Touch on the Rainy Side. But yeah, if you see Jesse Winchester albums, and I think there's been a reissue of either the first album or a best of recently that I've seen shown on the VC. So maybe some people starting to discover this American artist who came to Canada, but well worth checking out. Great sound with Jesse Winchester. Okay, here's a band I wasn't familiar with. They had a few albums in the late 70s, a band called, I'm not sure if I'm going to pronounce it properly, but it's Aviary or Aviary, something like that. Full-on rock, almost kind of glitter rock, really high vocals. If you're a fan of the darkness, you would definitely like this band for sure. They've kind of been compared to Queen, but I really got almost more of the sound of the later band, The Darkness, so that's worth checking out. Okay, here's some obscure Canadian, the band Wireless, and this is the album Positively Human, Relatively Sane on Anthem Records, which was also Rush's label. Great production on this, a great sound for this band. It's too bad they maybe didn't do some more stuff, but really nice, Wireless. I was really happy to pick that one up. It's kind of nice when you do some of those blind buys where you're not quite sure what the music's necessarily going to be all about, but then you're pleasantly surprised. Another Canadian female artist, this is Jane Siberry, and No Borders Here. Now, Jane Siberry is maybe not everybody's cup of tea. I quite like her, great singer-songwriter. Her voice is maybe not to everybody's liking, but she really had some interesting stuff, especially in the 80s. And if you're going to pick up one album, this would definitely be the one to pick up. The Waitress, I Muse Aloud, and Mimi on the Beach. It has that kind of 80s sound, but interesting, if you know what I mean. So Jane Siberry and No Borders Here. Okay, Barkley, James Harvest. I do have a few albums by this band. This is the album called Gone to Earth, and I was really taken by the first track called Hymn, which is actually a kind of an anti-drug song, if you will. You can almost interpret it as a sort of a religious song, but it's actually an anti-drug song, but it's absolutely beautiful. Just great vocals through this album, great playing, and great. Barkley, James Harvest. Okay, picking up some Duke Ellington, and picked up Duke Ellington. This is Swingin' the Sweets by Edward E. and Edward G. and the Peer Gynt Suites. Happy to get that one. Some later Bachmann Turner Overdrive. This is Rock and Roll Nights. Now, songwriter Jim Vallance is certainly featured through this one, and all the songs through Bruce Allen, which was Bryan Adams' manager. This one not too bad for some later Bachmann Turner Overdrive. Thankfully, is Randy Bachmann, though, is not part of the band at this point, and it's Jim Clench who does vocals along with C.F. Turner. So sadly, this is kind of post Randy Bachmann, which, you know, is a BTO without Randy Bachmann. Hard to say, but there you go, Rock and Roll Nights. Quite the cover there. Okay, some 80s fun with the original price sticker there. There's ABC and How to Be a Zillionaire. You know, 80s sound for sure, but yeah, I do like ABC. Okay, this is a reissue I was able to pick up. This is Brooke Benton and Lying to Me. I've always been a fan of Brooke Benton, just a terrific vocalist. Now, this is on the Vinyl Lovers 180 gram. Not everybody's a fan of the Vinyl Lovers label, but it was nice to see that they used the original cover for this one, because sometimes with these reissues for some of these companies, they, you know, change up the covers for these, you know, European reissues. But this was really nice, and the original liner notes, so I was pretty happy with that one. Lots of Squeeze albums out there, and surprisingly, I didn't have this one, Squeeze, and of course, this is East Side Story, and this is the only album to feature Paul Carrack, and of course, features the great track Tempted, which is probably worth the price of admission alone for this album. But yeah, the only album to feature Paul Carrack, Squeeze. Okay, Lee Oskar, great harmonica player, and so I was thrilled to pick up this album. I found this one, though, I don't know, maybe I'm going to have to give it a few more listens. I found this one a little kind of light jazz. I was maybe expecting a little bit more blues or something. Like, it's okay, but I was expecting maybe just a little bit more from this album. This was I believe, a German pressing on this one as well, but have to explore some more, but Lee Oskar. Okay, here's a band that does have a few albums out, a band I was not familiar with, but came across McKendree Spring, sort of rock folk, almost you could say progressive folk to a degree. This is the album Tracks. And then you can see the band there, but yeah, well worth listening to. And then I was also able to pick up McKendree Spring, and this is the album, and it's called Too Young to Feel This Old. You know, some of it works, some of it maybe not so much, but there you go. Okay, always a fan of the Average White Band, and there's a classic cover for you there. This is Warmer Communications. There's the band in the back there, but yeah, they've just got such a great funk sound. And this one actually, as you can see, that maybe I should fix that a little bit, is still sort of in the original shrink there, but as you can see, some of the shrink had come off there, and that's a little bit better. So, Average White Band. Always a big fan. It's interesting, Chris of Blues Guy Vinyl had just picked up a Staples album. Of course, this is the Staples, formerly known as the Staples Singers. This is on a different label, so this is on Warner as opposed to their Stax years. So once they became the Staples as opposed to the Staples Singers, they did get a little bit more disco for sure. This one's not too bad. Again, it's not quite their glory years of the, you know, the Stax Records years, but overall, not too bad. And this one is called Pass It On. And it's ironic, just chatting about Chris and Blues Guy Vinyl, and he picked up this one just recently, and this is Tease and One Night Stands. And I'm a fan of Tease. Again, this is, you know, full-on rock, kind of like more aggressive April Wine, if you will. Also on April Wine's label, Aquarius. Yeah, and Tease's Live in Japan is also really worth picking up, and Tease's Live in Japan is probably a better example for this band. Ironically, their big hit was a song called Sweet Misery, which is kind of a country style, not indicative of their sound, but this is well worth checking out. Great stuff throughout this whole album for sure. Okay, some early Dexys Midnight Runners, and you don't see too much Dexys Midnight Runners in, at least in where I'm shopping in this corner of Ontario, but it was nice to pick up some early Dexys. That's not Come On Eileen. And it's a band that certainly went through changes over the years. Bill Bruford. I don't come across too many solo Bill Bruford albums, and I was able to pick up Gradually Going Tornado. Of course, it features, you know, just Bill's amazing playing, and a really nice album. Overall, this features Dave Stewart on keyboards, Jeff Berlin on bass and lead vocals. I'm not familiar with Jeff Berlin. And then is described as the unknown John Clark on guitar. So Bill Bruford. Okay, and more Duke Ellington. I was able to pick up Duke Ellington. This is Indigos. This is a mono copy of this album, and this features an extra track that I believe was not featured on the stereo version, or at least the initial stereo version. I think The Sky Fell Down is featured on here. This is an absolutely just beautiful album. So, mono copy of Duke Ellington and Indigos. Pretty happy with that one. Okay, do love the Commodores and Natural High. And it's interesting, you can usually get to Commodores albums pretty cheap, but this one features the track, the mega hit, Three Times a Lady. And there's Lionel Richie there. All right, the Commodores, early Chilliwack, great Canadian band that certainly went through so many changes. Their early stuff is very like almost kind of proggy folk or proggy rock, proggy folk, that sort of thing. But then they went really much more pop as the years went on. This is their third album called All Over You. This is where you can start to see that they're going through some changes. So there's the front and there's the back. Still, a great listen to, but you can just start to hear a little bit more of the pop influence starting to come in. But again, they've got a number of great albums. Fly at Night, that track is a really, really great track. And then later, some of the harmonies with the songs like My Girl Gone, 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 and but then they did go almost kind of sounding Hall & Oates towards the end. But their early stuff is well worth checking out. Early stuff of this band is also well worth checking out. This is later stuff, though. This is Steppenwolf and the album Hour of the Wolf. This one's okay. Still got John Kay and generally, the rest of the band. Jerry Edmonton featured on here. But this one is okay. Definitely okay. The Hawk, Ronnie Hawkins, and was able to pick up The Hawk and the Rock. This is recorded live in the UK, 1982, but some of the photos inside, it's live in the UK, but it looks like it's some lounge somewhere in the UK, so not exactly Wembley Stadium or anything like that, but again, this is Ronnie Hawkins kind of doing all the great, Ronnie Hawkins songs, the rockabilly, but quite a note for Canadians. This album was exclusively available at Mac's Milk convenience stores. I don't know what kind of a promotion they were going on with this one, but I thought that was absolutely hilarious. Ronnie Hawkins, The Hawk. And I'm currently reading, obviously posthumously now, the Levon Helm autobiography, which is, I've been really enjoying it. It really talks about, especially with Levon Helm, as opposed to Robbie Robinson, that Levon Helm with Ronnie Hawkins was there right from the early days. Of course, Robbie Robertson came in later with the Hawks, but Levon Helm featured on those first Ronnie Hawkins albums. And so it was some really nice insight into Ronnie Hawkins and those years playing. Coming up to Canada, playing the bars up here. Okay, this is Tony Banks' first solo album, Tony Banks and A Curious Feeling. Of course, Tony Banks of Genesis, not a bad album at all. What's interesting on here is that this one had some slight leftovers. This one came out in the late 70s when the band was on a bit of a break, and it's got a track on here called From the Undertow, which is kind of a leftover track from the album, and then there were three. So it's interesting. This is an album where Tony Banks is clearly trying for maybe some more pop success, but still 1 foot firmly in the progressive rock era. So I find the album's a little bit conflicting that way, but overall it's not too bad. It was a good first effort, Tony Banks. Okay, more Commodores, and this is the album Moving On. And I think I read somewhere that Van Halen, for one of their later albums, I can't remember which one it was, had a very similar cover to this, just slightly different. And this is a Canadian pressing, and what's interesting is that they even include the Canadian, I don't know if you can see that there, the maple leaf with the M there. So on the American version, it's just got the regular Motown or the American Motown label, but for the Canadian issue, they even put the Canadian label there. So Commodores and Moving On. Sweet Love was the big one from this one, of course, with Lionel Richie and the gang there. Okay, Stephen Stills, the best of Stephen Stills. And I'm surprised I didn't have this in my collection before. You can't go wrong with Stephen Stills. And it's interesting, of course, with the Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young Deja Vu, they've interviewed Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and Neil Young didn't want to be interviewed. This was a CBS thing, so it was interesting to watch that. You should be able to find that generally online, but Stephen Stills, best of Stephen Stills. Okay, some early Peter Frampton. So this is Peter Frampton's Camel. Great album. I absolutely love his cover of the Stevie Wonder track, I Believe When I Fall in Love With You It Will Be Forever. Just absolutely wonderful. I do like the early Peter Frampton stuff before the big live album. Some live Earth, Wind, and Fire. This is the album Gratitude. This is a double live album. This does feature a Shining Star, but it's just, you know, Earth, Wind, and Fire get really kind of underrated in terms of great to soul and funk. So it was really enjoyable to listen to this one, Earth, Wind, and Fire, and Gratitude. Some jazz. How about Round Midnight from the, this is the movie soundtrack, the soundtrack produced by Herbie Hancock, featuring Chet Baker, Herbie Hancock, John McLaughlin, Bobby McFerrin on vocals. There's a lot of Bobby McFerrin vocals on here, maybe more so than I would have cared for. But in terms of a general listen, can't go wrong. Round Midnight. Okay, we've got Ladysmith Black Mambazo, and of course all their work with Paul Simon. Very enjoyable album. I don't often come across very much Ladysmith Black Mambazo, so I was really happy to pick this one up for sure. And this one came out pretty close to the same time as Graceland. This one came out 1988? Pretty close to when Graceland came out. And this is also, I don't know if you can quite see in the corner there, it's a gold stamp promo there. Okay, can't get enough Robin Trower. Just, gosh, what an amazing guitarist. Again, also a gold stamp promo on this one. And this is the album Caravan to Midnight. Oh, great guitarist. Okay, how about this one? This is, I didn't even know this existed. This is Seals and Crofts, and this is the album called One on One. This is a soundtrack that features Robbie Benson, but all the music is done by composer and sometimes singer Paul Williams. So Seals and Crofts didn't write any of the songs on this. They just performed the music, and it's quite nice overall. Unusual, maybe a soundtrack for I guess a basketball movie. I'm not familiar with this one, with this movie in particular, but yeah, there you go. So from the Seals and Crofts catalog. Okay, Star Castle, more sort of kind of proggy rock. By this time, they were definitely leaning much more towards pop, as you can maybe see from the from the presentation here. But I think that completes most of the Star Castle catalog that I have. I've enjoyed their albums. Usually you can find them pretty inexpensively, Star Castle. Okay, was thrilled to find this one. I never see this one out in the wild. This is the Powder Blues Band. This is a double album called Red Hot and True Blue, just from start to finish. Absolutely terrific. One of the songs that was kind of a minor hit was their cover of the track Farmer John. This is not a gatefold, it's just two albums in the single sleeve. But this was great, but I never seem to come across this one. I always come across, you know, the other Powder Blues albums. Great Canadian band from the West Coast. Just really good time blues. Well worth it. Okay, Ub40s Rat in the Kitchen. Do love that cover, and this is, you know, great album from UB40. Well worth checking out for sure. Of course, we all know UB40, and of course the title track, "Tell It Like It Is," all I want to do, and as I mentioned, the title track, "Rat in the Kitchen." Canadian band. This is Tom Cochran and Red Ryder, and the album Neruda, and this is a great early Red Rider album, straight up rock with Tom Cochran. Of course, Tom Cochran would also have a very successful solo career, and it's kind of, now it's like Tom Cochran and Red Rider, or Tom Cochran solo. It's kind of, the lines are blurred between Red Rider and Tom Cochran, but this features Light in the Tunnel, Power, Strength, and Numbers, Human Race, Napoleon Sheds His Skin. The whole first side is terrific. And this on Capitol Records. And there you have Tom Cochran there. Okay, here's an obscure Canadian band I didn't even know existed. This is the band Scrub-A-Lone Cane, and the album called Round One. Now this features from the Guess Who, Jim Cale is featured on here, and there's Jim there, post Guess Who years, but then it also features Paul Dean, who would later go on to be with Loverboy. So this is, it's rock. It's too bad these guys couldn't have stuck around for maybe a little bit more. This may be their only album. There might be a few more out there, but Scrub-A-Lone Cane and Round One. Yeah, really enjoyable. Glad to pick that one up. Okay, this is the band Kingfish that have a number of albums, but I think this is the only one that features Bob Weir from the Grateful Dead. So I was pretty happy to have picked this one up. Just a great, kind of like that Grateful Dead sound, Kingfish. I was pretty happy with that one. This is an album that was just an absolute delight to listen to, and it's a trio that I was always familiar with. Haven't had a chance to hear much of their stuff. Of course, we're talking about Lambert, Hendricks, and Ross. The sing-a-song of Basie, just an absolute, the joy leaps off the vinyl when you're listening to this. Just wonderful vocals, tight, and just, as I said, just joyous for sure. And here's another great album that I wasn't expecting maybe necessarily too much from, for whatever reason. This is Ramsey Lewis and the movie album. Now, he does fairly, I guess you could say, obscure selections, but it totally works. Great production on this album, and this was on Chess or Cadet label, and absolutely enjoyable for sure. Okay, M+M, Martha and the Muffins. This is maybe not one of their better albums, but certainly any M+M I tend to pick up. They had the hit Echo Beach, also Black Station, White Stations. Just a great 80s, kind of 80s funky kind of sound going on. Again, maybe not one of their better albums. I think this is the last album before they broke up. But yeah, worth checking out though. I do like Pat Benatar. Pat Benatar, why she's not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I do not know. But yeah, another great Pat Benatar album. Okay, Mamas and Papas. I wasn't even sure that this album existed, but Mamas and Papas, and this is them at the Monterey Pop Festival, and of course John Phillips and the Mamas and Papas were pretty instrumental at putting the Monterey Pop Festival together. So this is their performance, and it's nice to have the sort of the original, or kind of the original poster, obviously, with them put on the bottom there. But I was pretty happy to pick this up, because again, sometimes these Monterey Pop Festivals, either it's just artist on one side and somebody different on the other side. So this is all Mamas and Papas. Okay, can't get enough of this band. Was happy to pick up Best of Budgie, and this is a nice, not only a nice representation of the band, but this is a long album. I think this album is close to 1 hour in length. But you know, if you're gonna start getting into the band Budgie, great hard rock band, this is definitely a nice place to start. Okay, and then we switch gears with the Little River Band and Backstage Pass. You know, this features, again, it's a double live album. Not everybody likes the Little River Band. I still had kind of a, I still like the Little River Band. Just nice harmonies. It's definitely yacht rock at its finest, but double live album called Backstage Pass. Okay, America. And this is kind of, I want to say later America with the album Your Move. And a few hits off this one. Not too bad overall. Fairly enjoyable. Another Jesse Winchester album. This is the album Talk Memphis. Another great Jesse Winchester record, as I mentioned. If you can find Jesse Winchester, some of his stuff clearly is starting to get reissued, but yeah, if you can find Jesse Winchester, pick him up. Okay, was really happy to pick up Tom Robinson. This is Power in the Darkness. This is 2 records in this one. There's the full-length album and then sort of like an EP that's included as well. Some great kind of punk, if you will, from the 70s. There was a labeling issue on the records in this one on the EP that's included. It's the same label on both sides, but whoever owned this previously then just didn't leave it. They scratched out all of the labeling and then wrote in the correct songs. So there's that. But great stuff. Tom Robinson Band. And Adam and the Ants. How about King of the Wild Frontier? Or Kings of the Wild Frontier, I should say. Great to have some Adam and the Ants. I don't have too much of that in my collection. Another great Canadian artist that I've talked about, Ray Matarik. This is simply a self-titled Ray Matarik album, but it's later in his career, I think on an independent label. Not bad, maybe not as good as some of the Ray Matarik earlier stuff, but you know, kind of rock with some country leanings for his sound, but not one of the best Ray Matarik albums. And last but not least, picked up a copy of Frank Sinatra and Strangers in the Night, and it's fascinating. I had no idea really that Frank Sinatra is, with this being one of his, you know, big songs, but he was never a fan of this song, Strangers in the Night. In fact, I guess he either didn't or rarely did that song live. A little bit of, I think, a bit of water damage here, but a great album for sure, Strangers in the Night. So that is going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for dropping by, and we'll chat again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.